While governments tell you inflation is temporary, central banks worldwide are quietly hoarding over 1,000 tons of gold every single year using your tax dollars. Poland just increased their gold reserves by 67 tons, targeting 30% of all reserves in gold. The United States sits on 8,133 tons, worth over $1 trillion, yet they value it on government books at just $42.22 per ounce from 1971. This isn't new. In the 1930s, governments abandoned gold backing so they could print unlimited money. In 2008, they started buying gold again after telling us for decades it was worthless. And here's what should terrify you. Your national debt just hit $38 trillion. Real inflation is crushing your purchasing power, but your central bank is using taxpayer-backed reserves to shield themselves with the one asset that holds value while you absorb all the currency risk. They're not just managing monetary policy, they're systematically transferring wealth from your savings account into their gold vaults. Subscribe, because they'll never admit this wealth transfer is happening by design, but the reserve data proves exactly how the machine works. The most audacious financial deception of our time unfolds in plain sight, while governments across the globe orchestrate a carefully choreographed performance of monetary theatre. Central banks worldwide have embarked on the largest gold accumulation spree in modern history, purchasing over 1,000 tons annually during 2024 and 2025, yet simultaneously assure their citizens that inflation remains transitory and monetary policy serves the public interest. This contradiction exposes a fundamental truth that monetary authorities desperately hope remains hidden from public scrutiny. The mechanics of this systematic wealth extraction operate through a deliberately obscured process where taxpayer-backed reserves fund massive gold acquisitions, while ordinary citizens experience the erosion of their purchasing power through engineered inflation. The National Bank of Poland exemplifies this strategy perfectly, announcing an official target of gold, comprising 30% of its total reserves, while accelerating purchases that brought holdings to just over 500 tons, representing approximately 22% of its reserves. This aggressive accumulation occurred precisely as Polish citizens faced rising costs of living and economic uncertainty, revealing the stark disparity between institutional protection and public vulnerability. The United States presents perhaps the most egregious example of this wealth transfer mechanism, maintaining official gold reserves of approximately 8,133 tons, valued at current market rates exceeding $1 trillion. However, government accounting books continue to record this massive hoard at the antiquated valuation of $42.22 per ounce, a figure established during the Nixon administration's abandonment of gold convertibility in 1971. This accounting sleight of hand conceals the true magnitude of wealth concentration, while taxpayers remain unaware of the real value of assets their contributions have funded. The pattern extends far beyond individual nations, representing a coordinated global strategy where monetary authorities use public resources to shield themselves from the very currency debasement they actively engineer. Central banks understand that gold serves as the ultimate hedge against monetary instability, yet they simultaneously promote fiat currency systems that enable unlimited money printing and debt expansion. This dual strategy allows institutions to profit from both sides of the monetary equation, accumulating hard assets, while citizens absorb the inflationary consequences of expansive monetary policy. The timing of this gold accumulation reveals its strategic nature, intensifying particularly after the 2022 geopolitical disruptions that highlighted vulnerabilities in dollar-denominated reserve systems. Central banks recognized that currency weaponization and sanctions risks demanded diversification away from traditional reserve assets, yet they never communicated this systemic risk to the populations whose tax contributions fund these defensive measures. Instead, public messaging continues to emphasize the strength and stability of fiat currencies, while institutional behavior demonstrates profound skepticism about long-term monetary viability. This wealth transfer operates through the sophisticated mechanism of inflation taxation, where monetary expansion erodes the purchasing power of cash holdings, fixed income investments, and wage-based income, while simultaneously increasing the relative value of hard assets like gold. Central banks position themselves as beneficiaries of this process, using public resources to acquire inflation hedges, while ordinary citizens unknowingly finance their own economic disadvantage. The system ensures that institutions accumulate assets that appreciate during monetary instability, while individuals hold liabilities that depreciate during the same periods. Understanding this pattern requires examining the historical precedents that established these wealth extraction mechanisms, revealing how monetary authorities have repeatedly employed similar strategies during previous periods of economic transition and currency debasement, creating a template for systematic wealth concentration that operates regardless of political systems or economic ideologies. The transformation of the global monetary system during the mid-20th century represents one of history's most consequential acts of financial engineering, orchestrated through a carefully planned sequence of events that fundamentally altered the relationship between governments, citizens, and monetary value. The Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944 established a seemingly stable international monetary framework, where the United States dollar served as the global reserve currency, backed by gold at $35 per ounce, while other nations pegged their currencies to the dollar. This system created the illusion of monetary discipline while concentrating unprecedented financial power within American monetary authorities who could effectively control global liquidity flows and economic conditions. The architects of Bretton Woods understood that gold backing imposed natural constraints on monetary expansion, preventing governments from financing unlimited spending through currency creation. However, these same constraints proved incompatible with the ambitious social and military programs that American policymakers pursued throughout the 1960s. The Vietnam War demanded massive expenditures that far exceeded available tax revenues, while President Johnson's Great Society initiatives required unprecedented domestic spending on social programs and infrastructure development. Rather than raising taxes or reducing spending to maintain fiscal discipline, American authorities chose to finance these commitments through monetary expansion and deficit spending. The consequences of this fiscal irresponsibility became apparent as foreign governments and central banks recognized that American gold reserves could not possibly support the volume of dollars circulating internationally. Throughout the late 1960s, sophisticated monetary authorities began converting their dollar holdings into gold, creating a steady drain on United States gold reserves that threatened to expose the fundamental insolvency of the Bretton Woods system. Countries like France, under President Charles de Gaulle's leadership, aggressively exchanged dollars for gold, understanding that American monetary authorities had created far more dollar obligations than their gold reserves could satisfy. President Nixon's decision to suspend dollar convertibility to gold in August 1971 represented the culmination of this monetary crisis, effectively defaulting on America's promise to redeem dollars with gold. This action, euphemistically termed the Nixon shock, severed the last connection between major currencies and tangible value, inaugurating the era of pure fiat money, where governments possessed unlimited ability to create currency without any backing from precious metals or other real assets. The suspension was initially presented as a temporary measure to address speculative attacks on the dollar. Yet it became permanent once policymakers realized the extraordinary power that fiat money systems granted to monetary authorities. The transition to pure fiat currency fundamentally altered the relationship between governments and their citizens, transforming inflation from an economic phenomenon into a deliberate policy tool for wealth redistribution and debt reduction. Under gold-backed systems, monetary expansion remained constrained by available gold reserves, limiting governments' ability to finance spending through currency debasement. Fiat systems eliminated these constraints entirely, enabling unlimited monetary creation and providing governments with a mechanism to reduce real debt burdens through systematic erosion of currency purchasing power. This transformation created a bifurcated economic reality, where informed institutions and wealthy individuals could protect themselves through hard assets, real estate, and equity investments that maintained value during inflationary periods, while ordinary citizens holding cash, bonds, and fixed income investments experienced systematic wealth destruction. The elimination of gold convertibility established the template for modern monetary manipulation, where central banks could expand money supplies to benefit financial institutions and governments, while imposing the costs of currency debasement on unsuspecting populations who lacked access to inflation hedges or sophisticated financial instruments. The global financial crisis of 2008 fundamentally shattered the illusion that sophisticated financial engineering could eliminate systemic risk, forcing central banks worldwide to confront the inherent instability of fiat monetary systems they had spent decades promoting. This crisis exposed the fragility of interconnected banking networks, derivative markets, and currency arrangements that monetary authorities had previously dismissed as resilient and self-regulating. The subsequent policy responses revealed the extraordinary lengths to which central banks would go to preserve existing financial structures, implementing unprecedented money printing programs, asset purchases, and interest rate manipulations that would have been considered radical monetary experiments just decades earlier. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, many Western central banks had systematically divested their gold holdings under the confident assumption that precious metals represented antiquated monetary relics incompatible with modern financial sophistication. The Bank of England infamously sold approximately 400 tons of gold between 1999 and 2002 at historically low prices, while other European central banks coordinated similar divestments through the central bank gold agreements that limited but facilitated substantial gold sales. These decisions reflected prevailing orthodoxy among monetary authorities, who viewed gold as an unproductive asset that generated no interest income and occupied valuable balance sheet space that could be deployed more profitably in government bonds and foreign currency reserves. The intellectual foundation for these gold sales rested on the belief that central bank credibility and sophisticated monetary policy tools had rendered gold backing unnecessary for maintaining currency stability and public confidence. Monetary authorities argued that modern central banking techniques, including inflation targeting, forward guidance, and systematic market interventions, provided superior mechanisms for managing monetary stability compared to the constraints imposed by precious metal reserves. This confidence proved catastrophically misplaced when the 2008 crisis demonstrated that even the most sophisticated financial institutions and regulatory frameworks could not prevent systemic collapse or maintain public trust during periods of genuine monetary stress. The policy responses to the financial crisis marked a dramatic reversal in central bank attitudes toward gold accumulation and monetary diversification. Beginning around 2010, many central banks quietly resumed gold purchases, initially at modest levels that avoided drawing public attention to this strategic shift. However, the pace and scale of accumulation accelerated dramatically following geopolitical tensions that emerged after 2022, with annual central bank gold purchases exceeding 1,000 tons during 2024 and 2025. Representing levels not witnessed since the height of the Cold War, when monetary authorities actively prepared for potential currency warfare and economic disruption. The motivations driving this renewed gold accumulation extended far beyond simple portfolio diversification, encompassing fundamental concerns about dollar hegemony, sanctions, weaponization, and systemic monetary instability that central banks rarely acknowledge publicly. Sophisticated monetary authorities recognized that the same policy tools used to address the 2008 crisis, including quantitative easing, zero interest rates, and massive fiscal deficits, created long-term inflationary pressures that would ultimately undermine currency stability and purchasing power. Gold accumulation provided institutional insurance against these risks while maintaining public confidence in fiat currency systems. This strategic behavior reveals the fundamental dishonesty underlying contemporary monetary policy communication, where central banks simultaneously promote confidence in paper currencies while privately hedging against the very risks their policies create. The disconnect between public messaging about transitory inflation and temporary monetary accommodation versus institutional behavior demonstrating expectations of persistent monetary instability exposes the deliberate deception that characterizes modern central banking. Citizens receive assurances about monetary stability, while their tax-funded institutions position themselves for the currency debasement that inevitably follows unlimited money creation and debt monetization. The systematic wealth extraction mechanism operating in contemporary monetary systems functions through the deliberate coordination of two seemingly unrelated processes that work in perfect synchronization to transfer purchasing power from ordinary citizens to institutional holders of hard assets. The first component involves the engineered erosion of fiat currency purchasing power through monetary expansion, asset purchases, and artificially suppressed interest rates that create persistent inflationary pressures across consumer goods, services, and essential commodities. The second component encompasses the simultaneous accumulation of inflation-resistant assets, particularly gold, by the same institutions responsible for implementing the monetary policies that generate currency debasement. Central banks orchestrate this dual mechanism by expanding their balance sheets through quantitative easing programs, purchasing government bonds, corporate debt, and other securities with newly created money that increases the overall supply of currency circulating throughout the economy. These asset purchases simultaneously suppress interest rates below natural market levels and inject liquidity into financial markets, creating artificial demand that inflates asset prices while making traditional savings vehicles like bank deposits and government bonds inadequate hedges against currency debasement. The resulting inflationary environment ensures that citizens holding cash, fixed income investments, or wage-dependent income experience systematic erosion of their purchasing power over time. The official inflation measurements published by government statistical agencies consistently understate the real cost increases experienced by ordinary households who face dramatic price appreciation in housing, healthcare, education, food, and energy that far exceeds the headline Consumer Price Index figures used to guide monetary policy decisions. This statistical manipulation serves multiple purposes, enabling central banks to maintain accommodative monetary policies longer while minimizing public awareness of the true extent of currency debasement occurring throughout the economy. Meanwhile, sophisticated institutional investors and monetary authorities position themselves in assets that benefit from or remain protected during inflationary periods. Gold represents the ultimate monetary hedge within this system, because it maintains its purchasing power relative to fiat currencies over extended time periods, despite generating no interest income or dividend payments that characterize other investment vehicles. Central banks understand this fundamental monetary principle and deploy taxpayer-backed reserves to acquire substantial gold holdings, precisely because they recognize the long-term unsustainability of unlimited money creation and debt monetization policies they actively implement. The accumulation of gold provides institutional insurance against the very monetary instability these same institutions create through their policy decisions. The mechanism ensures that ordinary citizens bear the full burden of currency debasement, while institutions responsible for creating monetary instability protect themselves through hard asset accumulation funded by public resources. Retirees holding government bonds experience negative real returns as inflation exceeds interest payments. Workers see their wages lose purchasing power despite nominal increases, and savers watch bank deposits shrink in real terms as interest rates remain below inflation levels. Meanwhile, central banks use the reserves these citizens provide through tax payments to purchase gold that appreciates during periods of monetary instability. This wealth transfer operates continuously and automatically, requiring no legislative approval or public debate, because it functions through the complex technical mechanisms of monetary policy that remain largely invisible to ordinary citizens. The system creates the perception of economic normalcy while systematically redistributing wealth from productive savers and workers toward institutional holders of hard assets and financial securities. Central banks present themselves as neutral technical institutions, managing monetary stability while actively engineering the conditions that benefit sophisticated investors at the expense of unsophisticated savers. The mathematical certainty of this wealth extraction mechanism ensures its continued operation regardless of political changes, economic cycles, or public awareness, because the fundamental structure of fiat monetary systems requires continuous expansion to service ever-growing debt obligations while maintaining the illusion of financial stability and economic growth. The National Bank of Poland exemplifies the contemporary application of systematic gold accumulation strategies, demonstrating how central banks exploit geopolitical crises to accelerate wealth transfer mechanisms while maintaining public narratives about monetary stability and economic security. Through 2025, Polish monetary authorities increased their official gold holdings by approximately 67 tons, bringing total reserves to roughly 515 tons, representing 22% of the nation's total reserves, while publicly announcing an ambitious target of 30% gold allocation. This aggressive accumulation campaign intensified dramatically following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, providing convenient justification for policies that had been planned long before the geopolitical crisis emerged. The timing and scale of Poland's gold purchases reveal the calculated nature of these acquisitions, occurring precisely as Polish citizens experienced severe inflationary pressures across housing, energy, food, and essential services that far exceeded official government statistics. While ordinary Polish families struggled with rising costs and stagnant wages, their central bank deployed taxpayer-backed reserves to purchase hundreds of tons of gold at premium prices, effectively using public resources to hedge against the very monetary instability that central bank policies helped create. The disconnect between institutional self-protection and public vulnerability demonstrates the fundamental inequity embedded within contemporary monetary systems. Polish monetary authorities justified these massive gold purchases through public statements emphasizing diversification away from dollar-denominated assets and protection against potential sanctions or currency warfare. Yet they never acknowledged that these same risks threatened ordinary Polish savers and retirees who lacked access to similar hedging mechanisms. The central bank's gold accumulation strategy provided institutional insurance against currency debasement and geopolitical instability, while Polish citizens remained exposed to inflation taxation and monetary manipulation through their holdings of cash, government bonds, and wage-dependent income streams. The United States represents an even more egregious example of this wealth concentration mechanism, maintaining official gold reserves of approximately 8,133 tons that constitute the world's largest sovereign gold hoard, valued at current market prices exceeding $1 trillion. This massive accumulation of precious metals occurred over decades through various acquisition programs funded ultimately by American taxpayers, yet the full extent of this wealth concentration remains hidden through antiquated accounting methods that value gold holdings at $42.22 per ounce, a price established during the Nixon administration's abandonment of gold convertibility in 1971. American monetary authorities continue expanding money supplies, purchasing trillions of dollars in government bonds and mortgage securities, and maintaining artificially suppressed interest rates that systematically erode the purchasing power of dollar-denominated savings and fixed-income investments held by ordinary Americans. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve and Treasury Department sit atop a gold hoard worth over $1 trillion that provides complete protection against the currency debasement their policies deliberately engineer. This arrangement ensures that American institutions benefit from both monetary expansion and hard asset appreciation, while American citizens bear the full cost of inflation taxation and currency manipulation. The parallel behavior of Polish and American monetary authorities reveals the global coordination underlying contemporary gold accumulation strategies, where central banks worldwide exploit public resources to position themselves advantageously, while their citizens face systematic wealth extraction through inflation and monetary debasement. These case studies demonstrate that gold hoarding represents not merely prudent diversification, but deliberate wealth transfer from public savings into institutional hard asset reserves, funded through taxation and monetary expansion that ordinary citizens cannot escape or hedge against effectively. The contemporary monetary landscape reveals an unprecedented acceleration of wealth transfer mechanisms that operate with mathematical precision while remaining largely invisible to the populations bearing their costs. Central banks worldwide have sustained gold purchasing programs exceeding 1,000 tons annually throughout 2022, 2023, and 2024, representing the most aggressive institutional accumulation of precious metals in modern financial history. This coordinated global strategy unfolds simultaneously as national debts reach astronomical levels, with the United States federal debt surpassing $38 trillion during 2025, creating interest payment obligations that consume increasingly larger portions of government budgets and require continuous monetary accommodation to remain serviceable. The disconnect between official inflation measurements and lived economic reality has reached levels that strain public credibility in government statistical reporting, as households across developed nations experience cost increases that far exceed the 3 to 4% annual inflation rates published by central statistical agencies. Housing costs, healthcare expenses, educational fees, food prices, and energy bills have increased at rates approaching 10 to 15% annually in many regions, while wages and fixed income investments lag dramatically behind these real cost increases. Meanwhile, central banks continue deploying taxpayer-backed reserves to purchase gold at record pace, using public resources to hedge against the very monetary instability their policies systematically create. The mechanism operates through the sophisticated coordination of fiscal and monetary policies that ensure institutional protection while maximizing wealth extraction from ordinary savers and wage earners. Government debt expansion requires central bank accommodation through asset purchases and money creation, generating persistent inflationary pressures that erode the purchasing power of cash holdings, government bonds, and salary-based income streams. Simultaneously, these same institutions deploy the reserves provided by taxpayers to acquire hard assets that appreciate during periods of currency debasement, creating a perfect hedge against the monetary chaos they deliberately engineer. Public communications from monetary authorities continue emphasizing the temporary nature of inflationary pressures and the benign character of accommodative monetary policies, while institutional behavior demonstrates profound skepticism about long-term currency stability and monetary viability. The contradiction between official messaging about transitory inflation and systematic hard asset accumulation exposes the fundamental dishonesty underlying contemporary central banking, where authorities promote confidence in fiat currencies while privately positioning themselves for sustained monetary instability and currency debasement. This wealth extraction system operates with relentless efficiency across political systems, economic cycles, and geographic boundaries, demonstrating that the pattern represents structural features of fiat monetary systems rather than temporary policy mistakes or unintended consequences. Nations as diverse as Poland, China, India, Russia, and Turkey have implemented remarkably similar gold accumulation strategies, funded through taxpayer resources, while their populations experience systematic erosion of purchasing power through inflation taxation and currency manipulation. The inevitable conclusion emerges from examining this coordinated global behavior that ordinary citizens face a rigged monetary system designed to benefit institutional holders of hard assets while imposing the costs of currency debasement on unsophisticated savers and workers. Understanding this mechanism requires recognizing that central bank gold accumulation signals institutional expectations of sustained monetary instability, currency debasement, and systematic wealth transfer that will continue operating regardless of political rhetoric about economic recovery or monetary normalization. The pattern repeats throughout monetary history with mathematical predictability, creating imperative for individual financial preparation and portfolio diversification away from fiat currency exposure toward assets that maintain purchasing power during periods of systematic currency destruction.